I'd never been much of a fisherman, but night fishing gave me something I couldn't find anywhere else: silence. Not peace, exactly. Just an absence of noise. An absence that became louder the longer you sat in it. That's what drew me to Lake Fern again and again, even after the local stories started circulating. It was late August, still warm but thick with that kind of humid air that clings to your lungs. I had driven out to the lake after work, dragging my collapsible chair and old cooler down to the edge of the dock. I didn't even care about catching anything that night. I just wanted to sit with my line in the water and let the blackness wrap around me. It was around midnight when I first noticed the boat. It wasn't moving. Just sitting about 50 feet out from shore, facing me. No lights. No sounds. I didn't hear it approach, and it hadn't been there an hour earlier. I was sure of it. I stood up to get a better look, squinting through the fog that had started to roll in. There was someone in the boat. Not rowing. Not standing. Just sitting, perfectly still, facing me. I waited for them to move. Wave. Call out. Anything. But the figure didn't stir. I don't know how long I stood there, waiting, hoping I'd imagined it, until I finally called out. "You good out there?" No answer. Just the small lapping of water against the wood of the dock. I tried again. "Need help?" Still nothing. I sat back down, telling myself they were just another night fisher, maybe lost in their own world, same as me. But something about the way they sat didn't feel right. It wasn't relaxed. It wasn't natural. It looked like they were waiting for something. That's when I noticed my fishing line was gone. Snapped clean. I hadn't felt a bite. The rod hadn't even twitched. But the line dangled limp, as if whatever had taken it had done so slowly, deliberately. And the figure in the boat tilted their head. Not a slow, casual tilt. A sudden, jarring angle, like a puppet's head knocked askew. I stood up again, cold now despite the heat, every hair on my body standing on end. The fog had thickened, creeping around the dock like smoke, and the boat was now closer. Maybe 10 feet closer. I hadn't heard it move. I packed up fast. Threw my chair in the trunk, left the cooler behind. I didn't even reel in what was left of the line. I just got in the car and drove off, heart hammering, headlights cutting through the dense fog as if it were something alive. When I got home, I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch, lights on, trying to convince myself it was just a weird guy in a boat. Just bad luck. Just a coincidence. But 2 days later, I found my cooler back in my driveway. Dry. Clean. And inside, neatly folded, was a torn piece of my fishing line, coiled into a perfect circle. I didn't report it. What would I even say? I stood there in my driveway for a long time, staring into the cooler like it might offer an explanation. It was undeniably mine, same faded stickers, same crack in the lid from when I dropped it years ago. But it was clean. Too clean. The inside was pristine, like it had been scrubbed. Sterilized. I told myself it was a prank. Someone at the lake messing with me. Maybe I'd been followed home. That would be terrifying enough on its own, but it didn't explain how they knew which cooler was mine. Or how they'd managed to leave it without waking me, without triggering the motion sensor by the garage. For a few days, I didn't go outside after dark. I barely even opened the blinds. I didn't talk about it. Not to my brother, who'd always tease me for fishing alone. Not to Danny, my ex, who used to worry I'd end up like those old men who disappear on lakes. I just kept quiet and tried to forget. But on the 5th night, I dreamt of water. Not being in it, being under it. Heavy pressure on my chest. The kind that makes you feel like your heart is being squeezed by something slow and ancient. There was a boat above me, the same one from the lake. I could see it through the water, the silhouette of a man seated at the bow. Only he wasn't looking into the lake. He was looking down, directly at me. When I woke up, my shirt was soaked. Not with sweat, wet. Like I'd been dragged out of the lake myself. My bed was dry. The rest of me was dry. Just my shirt, clinging to me like a second skin. I didn't sleep the next night. Or the one after. I kept every light on in the house. Triple-checked the locks. But the dreams came anyway, sometimes twice a night. Always the same, me under the surface, him in the boat, watching. One night, I drove back to Lake Fern. I told myself I was just trying to confront it. Get closure. I brought no rod. No chair. No cooler. Just a flashlight and a thermos full of coffee. I parked right at the trailhead and walked down toward the dock. It was dead quiet, save for the crunch of my boots on gravel and the soft hum of cicadas. The dock looked different. Older. As if it had aged 50 years in the 3 weeks I'd been gone. Some of the planks were rotting. One had collapsed entirely. And yet I kept walking, until I stood at the very edge and stared into the lake. There was nothing at first. Just fog and still water. But slowly, a ripple formed. A single, perfect circle. Then another. And another. And then the boat was there. No sound. No motion. Just presence. The man was sitting exactly where he'd been before, facing me. I lifted the flashlight and aimed it toward him. The beam landed on his chest. Not his face. That's when I saw it. He was holding something. A small bundle. I squinted and realized what it was, another cooler. My cooler. Identical, even down to the crack. And inside, barely visible under the light, something pale. A hand? Small. Childlike. Limp. I turned and ran, nearly tripping over the broken dock boards. I didn't stop until I was back at the car. I never went back to Lake Fern again. But some nights, I still find water pooled under my bed. And I never, ever opened the cooler that showed up in my garage last week. I only went night fishing with my uncle because I didn't want to stay home alone. My parents had flown to Denver for a wedding, and I was 15, old enough to be left for the weekend, technically. But I hated the silence of our house at night. Hated the way I could hear every creak of the floorboards upstairs, even when no one was there. So when Uncle Vic offered to take me out to Grayson Pond, I said yes before he finished the sentence. He picked me up just after 9, an hour later than planned. The bed of his truck was already loaded with tackle boxes and a cooler, and his old lantern was swinging from the hook like a pendulum. Grayson Pond sat at the edge of town, past the last stretch of paved road. The sky above it was unnaturally dark. No moon. No stars. The kind of dark that makes it hard to tell where the land ends and the water begins. Uncle Vic didn't talk much. He was the kind of guy who believed in silence, who thought too many words scared away the fish. We set up on the eastern side of the pond, near the spot where the trees leaned over the water like they were whispering to it. The crickets died down after midnight. That's not just a poetic thing. They literally stopped. 1 second there was the steady, reassuring noise of the night, and the next it was just blank. Like someone had muted the world. Probably a coyote, Uncle Vic muttered, though he didn't sound like he believed it. That's when I noticed something strange. My line was moving, but not in that sharp, tugging way fish do. It was twitching. Rhythmic. Like someone was tapping it from underneath the water. I looked at Uncle Vic. He hadn't noticed. His line sat still. Dead calm. I reached for my rod slowly, trying not to disturb the tension. The line twitched again. Tap. 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 Then stopped. I reeled in, nervous, and found the hook clean. No bait. But something was tied to the end. A piece of string. Frayed and gray. It had been knotted around the hook tightly. Tied into a loop. Not a fisherman's knot, something else. Almost like a bracelet. "Hey," I said, showing it to Vic. "Did you see this?" He looked at it, squinting. "Where'd you get that?" "It was on my line. It wasn't there when I cast." He stared at it for a long time. Then without a word, he stood up and started packing his things. "We're done," he said, voice flat. "What?" "Why?" "Just done. Grab your stuff." I tried to argue, but he was already walking to the truck. I stayed for a moment longer, staring at that loop of string, and then dropped it back into the pond. As we drove off, I asked again what was wrong. Uncle Vic hesitated, then said something I still think about to this day. 30 years ago, 2 boys drowned here. They used to make bracelets just like that. Said it was a pact. I felt my skin crawl. What kind of pact? He didn't answer. Just gripped the wheel tighter. When I got home that night, I found another loop of string, sitting on my doorstep. Still damp. I didn't tell my parents when they got back. What would I say? That I found a wet bracelet on the doorstep after fishing with Uncle Vic? That he bailed without explanation after I reeled in something tied in a dead boy's knot? It felt too heavy. Like naming it made it real. But the strangeness didn't stop. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of dripping. Slow, rhythmic. Too loud to be a sink, too distant to be in my room. I followed it down the hall, convinced I'd left a window open or knocked over a cup. But when I stepped into the kitchen, everything was dry. Silent. Except for the sound of line being reeled in. It was faint, so faint I thought I was imagining it. That gentle, metallic click and whir of a crank. Like someone fishing just outside. I froze. Our kitchen window looked out onto the backyard. And past that, over the fence, was a narrow drainage ditch that led toward the woods. There was no pond back there. No water at all unless it rained. But that night, something about the sound, its steadiness, its patience, made my stomach knot. I stood by the window, barely breathing. The air was too still. The sky too dark. Then, for just a second, I thought I saw movement. A slight swaying, like a figure leaning back and forth. I turned on the porch light. Nothing. No one there. No footprints. No sounds. But the next morning, a third bracelet was hanging from the gate. Same string. Same knot. Still wet. I called Uncle Vic. Told him everything, the sound of the reel, the bracelet on the gate. He didn't sound surprised. Just tired. I should have never brought you there, he said. What's happening? You ever hear of a marker line? I hadn't. He explained it slowly, like someone remembering a half-forgotten nightmare. A marker line's what some people used to use to fish at night. Tie a series of hooks along a stretch of string and lay it out along the bank. Let it sit while they sleep or do something else. So it's not about the fish. It's about what you catch that ain't supposed to be there. I didn't know what to say. He continued. Those boys, the ones I told you about, they were obsessed with that idea. Used to talk about how the pond was deeper than it looked. That it was hollow. Like it didn't stop at the mud. They said they could feel things tug back that weren't fish. I waited for him to laugh. To tell me it was just a campfire story. But he didn't. I think they left their line out too long, he said. And something else started using it. That night I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I heard the line again. Click. 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 Only this time, it was louder. Closer. Coming from the hallway. I opened the door to find the carpet soaked. Small wet footprints trailed toward the back door. At the end of the hall, something was dangling from the knob. A bracelet. Same string. Same knot. But this one wasn't wet. It was dripping. I followed the prints outside. Just past the gate, barely visible in the grass, was a line stretched tight across the yard. It disappeared into the woods. I didn't follow it. Not all the way. But I listened. And for a long time, I heard the reel turning. As if something deep in the trees was pulling the line slowly, back in. And every few seconds it would stop. Wait. Then tug once. Just to see if I'd bite. They say fishing is about patience. But night fishing teaches you something different. It teaches you to watch. To sit still long enough that you stop trusting your eyes. To notice what's wrong with the stillness. I only went out to Miller's Reservoir because I couldn't sleep. It was late October, already cold enough that the breath curled from your mouth like smoke. I loaded my gear, drove the 15 minutes to the launch point, and dragged my kayak into the shallows. Miller's is an artificial reservoir, deep, dark, and flat as glass. It used to be a town years ago, flooded for power. Sometimes, when the water's low, you can see the tops of old street lamps sticking out, bent and rusting. I paddled out toward the center. The moon was nearly full, but clouds were moving in, soft and slow. I set my line and sat there, floating. The first hour was uneventful. The line stayed slack. My hands grew numb. The sky went from cloudy to starless. Still I stayed. And that's when I saw the light. It was faint, like the glow of a dying tail light. Red, pulsing gently. I thought it was my own kayak at first, maybe a reflection from my safety lamp, but when I twisted around, it was still in front of me. It was beneath the water. Not far, maybe 20 feet away, maybe less. It wasn't steady. The light pulsed once, then faded, then came back brighter. Like it was breathing. Curious, I reeled in my line and slowly paddled toward it. The closer I got, the colder the air became. Not just chilly, numbing. I could see my breath thick in the air, feel my fingers stiffen around the paddle. And the light, it didn't get any clearer. If anything, it looked deeper than before. Like it was sinking slowly, drawing me in. Then, a ripple hit the side of my kayak. Just one. Sharp. Like something had bumped it from below. I stopped paddling. That's when I noticed the sound. It wasn't the water. It wasn't the wind. It was beeping, a soft, rhythmic chirp. Like a machine. Like an old heart monitor. Coming from below the surface. I leaned forward, peering into the water. I couldn't see anything, just darkness, just that red light. And then the line on my pole snapped tight. No warning. No bite. Just whipped tight, yanked from below hard enough to jerk me sideways in the kayak. I grabbed the rod, tried to hold on, but it pulled again, harder. The whole kayak tilted. Water lapped in over the side. My feet were soaked. The line sizzled against the reel. And then, nothing. Slack. Whatever it was, it let go. I sat there shaking, soaked to the knees, breast shallow. The red light had vanished. The beeping had stopped. The reservoir was dead silent. I turned and paddled back as fast as I could. The surface behind me stayed calm. Too calm. When I got back to the launch, my flashlight flickered out. Twice. The second time, it stayed off for a full minute. In that minute, I heard something in the reeds behind me. Something dragging. I didn't wait. I left the kayak. Left the rod. Left the gear. Just ran. Back home, I found a single red LED on my doorstep. Still glowing. Still wet. And when I picked it up, it beeped once. The LED wouldn't turn off. No matter what I did, twisting, smashing, soaking, it kept glowing. A soft, pulsing red. One long blink, one short. Like Morse code. I thought about tossing it, but something about the weight of it felt wrong. Heavy. Familiar. It reminded me of something, but I couldn't place what. Not right away. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the light beneath the surface. That pulsing red beacon. That noise, high-pitched and distant, like something mechanical. Something alive. By morning, I was convinced it had followed me home. My front door was damp again. The kayak, which I'd left behind, was back on my lawn. Dry. Clean. But with deep gouges on the side. Parallel lines. As if something with long, metal claws had gripped it too tightly. I called the local ranger station. Told them a bear or something had gotten into my stuff. They took a report, but the guy on the phone sounded distracted. As I was describing the location, he cut me off. You said Miller's Reservoir? Yeah. Pause. We've had complaints. What kind? He lowered his voice, like someone might be listening. Disruptions. At night. Lights. Sounds. A couple of missing pets. Have you found anything? No. But listen, don't go back out there. Not after dark. I didn't plan to. But I couldn't stop thinking about that light. That night, I put the LED in the freezer, locked all the doors, and tried to sleep with a podcast on loop. Something light. But at 2:13 a.m., I woke up to the sound of beeping. Same tone. Same rhythm. Coming from the bathroom. I crept down the hall, heart hammering. The light was on. My reflection waited in the mirror. But behind me, in the reflection, the hallway was wrong. Darker. Wet. I turned. Nothing. Looked back at the mirror, normal again. I opened the bathroom cabinet. The LED was back. Sitting on the shelf like it had always been there. Still glowing. Still wet. That's when I realized what it reminded me of. A depth gauge. Not just a light, an old underwater monitor. The kind they used to install in submersibles. I'd seen one once on a field trip. A red LED, programmed to blink warnings at increasing intervals the deeper you went. This one was blinking faster now. That meant only one thing. Something was rising. I didn't stay another night. I drove to my brother's place 2 counties over. Told him I needed to crash for a few days. Didn't explain why. Didn't sleep. But the third night, he knocked on the guest room door. "You expecting someone?" "What?" "There's a guy outside." "In the pond." I froze. "What pond?" He led me to the back window. There was a man waist deep in the pond behind his house. Just standing. Facing the house. No flashlight. No phone. Just stillness. And on his chest, something glowed red. I backed away from the window. My brother went out with a baseball bat, yelling, threatening. But when he got to the water's edge, the man was gone. No splash. No footsteps. Just gone. But floating on the surface, where he'd stood, was a fishing line. Perfectly straight. Stretching across the pond into darkness. At the end of it, my fishing rod. The same one I lost in the reservoir. The line was pulled tight. Something on the other end had hooked deep. My brother wanted to reel it in. I begged him not to. But he did. And what came up wasn't a fish. Not a boot. Not trash. It was a second rod. Identical. But snapped. As if someone had used it to pull themselves out. I lied to my girlfriend about where I was going that night. Told her I had to work late. Really, I just needed to be alone. To sit at the end of a pier with my tackle box and a thermos of vodka-laced tea, watching the water forget the sun. Bracken Lake wasn't on any official maps anymore. It had dried halfway out a decade ago, then flooded again for reasons no one could explain. You had to hike 2 miles through the forest just to get to the bank, and even then, you'd miss it if you weren't listening for the frogs. There were no frogs that night. Just the wind and that low hum I always pretended was from power lines, even though there weren't any nearby. I cast my line around 10 and let the quiet stretch. The lake was motionless. Not still. Motionless. That unnatural flatness that feels less like calm and more like waiting. Around 11, I noticed my bobber had vanished. No splash. No tug. Just gone. I reeled in slow, expecting weeds or a snapped line. But something pulled back. Not a fish, too steady. Too smooth. It felt like someone else was reeling in from the other end. And then I saw it. Not in the water. On the far side of the lake. A person. Standing at the edge, holding a rod. A mirror of me. Same posture. Same stance. Even the same kind of jacket. They didn't wave. Didn't speak. Just reeled in, exactly when I did. I stopped. They stopped. I raised my arm. They raised theirs. But a beat slower. Just enough to be wrong. I laughed, nervously. Told myself it was some weirdo night fisher playing a prank. But deep down I knew. There was no trail on that side of the lake. No pier. Just forest. Dense. Untouched. I started packing up, but then the line pulled. Hard. Not a bite. A yank. A deliberate, human pull. The rod nearly flew out of my hands. I gripped it tight, but whatever had it was pulling back. Slow. Strong. It wasn't trying to escape. It was trying to take. I cut the line. Or tried to. My knife snapped in half. No joke. The blade sheared clean at the hilt. I stared at it, dumbfounded, then looked back across the water. The figure was gone. But the line was still taut. Still pulling. I dropped the rod and ran. Didn't bother with the tackle box. Left the thermos. Just ran. The whole way back through the woods, I could hear something trailing me. Not crashing, pacing. Matching my steps exactly. I got home around 1. Locked the doors. Closed the blinds. Tried to breathe. An hour later, I got a text. From my own number. It said, "Not done." Attached was a photo. Me, standing at the lake. Except I never took that photo. And in the reflection on the water, there were 2 figures on the pier. One of them was me. The other was smiling. I didn't sleep. Not after the photo. Not after seeing that other me, the one in the reflection, standing just a little too close, with that grin that didn't reach the eyes. The kind of smile you only see in mannequins or nightmares. The kind that waits. I deleted the message, but it came back. Twice. Each time from a different spoof number, each time with a new photo. Me at the lake. Me looking over my shoulder. Me asleep at my desk, except I hadn't fallen asleep. I stayed home the next day. Called in sick. Kept all the lights on and every curtain drawn. But around noon, the power cut out. No storm. No wind. Just sudden dark silence, like someone had unplugged the house from the world. I opened the curtains. All of them. I don't know why, maybe to prove I wasn't afraid. But when I pulled back the living room drapes, I saw a fishing bobber. Not outside. Inside. Floating in a glass of water on the coffee table. Gently swaying. No note. No explanation. I poured the water out and threw the bobber in the trash. Then I took the trash outside, double-bagged it, and left it in the bin on the curb. Felt stupid doing it. But I had to. That night, the power came back. The lights returned like nothing had happened. My phone buzzed with old notifications. But when I opened my messages, there were no photos. Just one sentence. "You dropped your line." The next morning, my rod was back on my porch. The same one I'd left at Bracken Lake. But the line wasn't nylon. It was hair. Human. Long, dark strands braided into a cord that coiled around the reel like a snake. I couldn't tell if it had been cut or pulled. I didn't want to know. I burned it. Took it to the fire pit in the backyard, doused it in lighter fluid, and lit it. It screamed. Not loudly. Just a faint, high-pitched shriek like wet metal heating too fast. I dropped the lighter and backed away, watching the fire flicker into a strange, bluish flame before it died out. The rod was gone. Completely. Not even ash left. I stayed with my girlfriend that night. Didn't tell her everything, just said I was spooked, that someone might be messing with me. She made tea, turned on some music, and let me crash on her couch. For a few hours it helped. I started to believe I had broken the pattern. That the line was really cut this time. Until just after 3 a.m. She woke me up. Said she heard tapping at the window. We lived on the 3rd floor. I went to the window, expecting a bird or maybe a branch swaying in the wind. But there were no trees. Just a smear. Right on the glass. 4 thin streaks, arched downward, like the curve of a hand dragging slowly, long nails tracing the surface. And on the ledge below the window, barely visible, sat a fishing bobber. Still wet. I took a photo of it and zoomed in. The reflection on the plastic surface showed a face. Mine. But older. Hollow. Wearing the same smile as before. That was a month ago. Every week since, I've found something new. A hook on my doormat. A piece of wet string tied to my doorknob. Once, a single drop of water in the middle of my pillow. I think whatever it is, whoever it is, it doesn't want to take me under. Not yet. It wants me to cast the line back out. To finish what we started. To reel something up. Or maybe, to be reeled in. I never liked group fishing trips, especially not at night. But it was Josh's idea, his birthday, his gear, his rules. 4 of us in total, Josh, me, Darren, and Kyle. We loaded up the truck with rods and beer and drove out to Sand Hollow, a quiet stretch of water so still it looked like the sky had fallen and forgotten how to move. We set up on the south dock around 10 p.m. The guys talked and laughed like they were on a camping show, but I stayed quiet. There was something wrong with the water. Not the usual kind of wrong, no weird smell or color. Just wrong. Like it was pretending. Josh cast first. Then Kyle. Then Darren. I waited. Come on, man, Josh called. Gotta get your line in before midnight. Why midnight? I asked. He just grinned. That's when the good ones bite. I didn't laugh. Around 11:30, Kyle got the first nibble. He yanked too hard, lost the bait. Laughed it off, reeled in again. Josh cracked another beer and sat closer to the edge. Then, at 11:57, Darren's line went tight. He let out a shout, the kind people make when they think they've got a prize catch. We all crowded around as he wrestled with it, whatever it was. The rod bent hard. Too hard. Then something snapped. Not the rod. Not the line. The water. It split. Just for a second. Like something massive breached beneath us without surfacing. A deep groan echoed from below. Not bubbles. Not splash. A groan, like an old door opening underwater. The line went slack. Darren reeled in. Nothing. Except the hook was gone. So was the weight. In their place, a small metal tag was tied to the line with black twine. It looked hand-stamped. There were 3 letters engraved crudely into it. JSC. What the hell is that? Kyle asked. Josh went pale. He turned slow, then muttered, I'm done, and started packing up. What's going on? I asked. Josh didn't answer. He just grabbed his tackle box and walked back toward the truck. Darren kept staring at the tag. He didn't speak. None of us did. When I got home, I couldn't sleep. That image, those letters, wouldn't leave my mind. JSC. I googled every variation I could think of. Local missing persons. Campers. Fishermen. Nothing. Then I remembered something from school. Johnston State Cemetery. It was on the north edge of Sand Hollow. Abandoned for decades. Supposedly flooded in the 70s when the lake expanded. I found one grainy photo. A crumbling headstone, half submerged in black water. The name on it? Jonathan S. Cray. Died 1963. Occupation fisherman. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Kyle texted. Said Darren hadn't come home? Thought maybe he'd gone back to the lake. I didn't respond. Because I'd already been up since dawn, sitting in my kitchen, staring at a new object placed neatly on my windowsill. A hook. Old, rusted. And hanging from it, a wet tag that read, KW. Kyle's initials. I tried calling Kyle. Straight to voicemail. I texted Josh. No answer. I even considered driving out to the lake myself, but the thought of that place, the sound the water made, the stillness, kept me rooted to the kitchen chair, staring at the hook on my windowsill. At 4:17 a.m., I heard something tap against the back door. 3 taps. Deliberate. Measured. Wet. I grabbed a flashlight and eased toward it. The porch light flickered twice as I approached. When I opened the door, no one was there. Just a small puddle, shaped like a footprint, right on the welcome mat. And next to it, another tag. This one said, Dr. Darren. The hook beside it was larger. Barbed. Blood-stained. I locked every door. Every window. I called the police. They sent a cruiser to Darren's place. He wasn't home. At 9 a.m., I called Josh's number again. Finally, he picked up. His voice was ragged. "You're getting the tags too?" he asked before I even said hello. "Yes." There was a pause. Then, quieter. "I didn't think it would keep going." "What the hell is this, Josh?" Another pause. "When I was a kid," he said slowly, "I used to fish at Sand Hollow with my grandfather. He told me there were certain things you didn't throw back." I didn't understand. "What does that mean?" "There's a rule," he said. "One cast, one return. If you pull something up that's not a fish, you don't throw it back. You bury it. You mark it. You give it rest." I was silent. "My grandfather said the lake keeps score." I asked if he'd ever caught something. He didn't answer. Just hung up. That evening, I found the third tag. It was stuck to my front door with a fish hook. JR. My initials. The message was clear. I was next. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't write a note. I just drove straight to the lake, gripping my old rod the whole way like it might protect me. The water was still as ever. The air smelled of rust and wet earth. The trees were silent. The pier looked older somehow. Warped. Rotting. I cast my line without bait. Just the hook. I waited. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Then the line jerked. Once. Twice. I reeled it in. There was no fish. Just a hand. Pale. Severed. Clutching another tag. I dropped the rod. Stumbled back. But I had to see. The tag read. JSC. Jonathan S. Cray. Again. I stared out at the water. My heart beat so hard it felt like my ribs would break. Then I saw the shape. Just beneath the surface. A figure. Floating. Staring up at me. His eyes were open. He smiled. And then he sank. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I felt the hook before I saw it, dragging lightly across my ankle, as if something below had brushed me with it. Testing the line. I ran. Didn't stop until I was home. I didn't sleep. Not that night. Not since. Now every morning, there's a hook somewhere new. On my bathroom sink. Inside the mailbox. Hanging from the ceiling fan. Always rusted. Always damp. Always waiting. I haven't gone fishing again. Not even during the day. But I know the water remembers. It's patient. And eventually, it'll cast for me. Because one cast, one return. And I pulled something up I never should have touched.